All right, so let's make a formal introduction for our listeners. Good afternoon, Dave. My name is Claudio, and I'm calling you from Washington, D.C.
Good afternoon to you.
From the studios in Fairfax City, we're very humble and grateful that Dave Cousin accepted our invitation to our show. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on your show. It's a great pleasure.
Same here. Dave, let's go back to the beginning. Were you born like in a musical family, and how old were you when you perhaps began taking guitar lesson, piano lesson, that sort of things?
I wasn't really born into a musical family. My grandmother played piano by ear. My mother played a little bit of piano by ear, not very much. But when I was 11 years old, my mother said, I think you ought to learn to play the piano, and sent me off to a music teacher. And in a funny way, it was the best thing I did, and not the worst thing I did. It was a very good thing to do. But I was much more interested in the pop music of the day than learning classical music and becoming doing my grades. So I was allowed to play pretty much anything I wanted to play, although I had to learn my scales and learn where the notes were. But I was learning all the popular hits of the day, or when I was a kid, and that and I enjoyed that very much. But the trouble was that when I was about 13, I was getting on quite well at it. Every time a visitor came to the house, my mother would say, David, go and sit at the piano and play them your latest tune. And I hated it. I absolutely hated it. And so in the end, I just gave up playing the piano. But then I heard Lonnie Donegan and the Rock Island Line on the radio, and I thought, I want a guitar. And so we didn't have a car at the time. We had a chromium-plated tandem bicycle, my dad on the front with me on the back, and we cycled about 5 miles to the nearest music shop. There was a guitar hanging in the window. It cost £6.50. Dad bought it for me, and I sat on the back of that tandem with the guitar under my arm. I took it back, and I didn't have a clue what to do with it. But because of Lonnie Donegan, now this is a very interesting part, I became very interested in where the song Rock Island Line came from. And I found out that Huddie Leadbelly as he was known, had recorded that song for the Library of Congress. And I went into the library and I got out a book about Leadbelly. And in that book about Leadbelly, it had a song called Down in the Valley. And it only had 2 chords in it. And that was the very first song I ever sang. Down in the valley below. Hold it easy, see the wind blow, whatever it was. But that was the first song, but it only had the 2 chords. And so it was listening to Lonnie Donegan doing the Rock Island Line, getting interested in Leadbelly. Leadbelly, of all people, for me, for what I did now, what I play now, is very strange. Me wanting to play the blues, if you like. Not the blues, but Leadbelly was not more than the blues. He was folk blues. But still, he was an immense impression on me. And so that's where my music career basically started from.
Good for you. Good for you. And then when or you or your mom realized, well, this young kid not only can play piano, play the guitar, but can sing as well, right? So when the singing came into your life?
I didn't know I could sing. I was in the school choir, if you like, but that was junior. It's a bit of church choir, and also the school choir. But of course, I had to go. We were very broke. Mum and Dad couldn't afford for me to have school lunches, so I had to cycle home for lunch and then come back again. So choir practice was held in lunchtime, so I missed out on that as well. So, but I knew I could sing a bit. But that was it. I didn't know whether I had any sort of voice. I don't have much of a voice now, as far as many people are concerned, but I get by.
You're very humble. People in the UK in general are very humble as compared to here in America, and a completely different culture. You in the UK, I go there very often for music related stuff, and people in the UK are very different from America. You know,
Oh,
they introvert, they keep it to themselves. You know, even they wouldn't promote themselves, and so forth. People in America are the other way around, my opinion. But so, were you in any band in the high school when you were, I don't know, 15, 16 years?
only when I got to the last year at school, and Lonnie Donegan was really becoming very predominant, and skiffle was the craze. And we formed our little school group, which was T-chess bass, and two of us, Tony Hooper and myself, on acoustic guitars, and a guy playing the washboard, and we became the Gin Bottle Four. That was our first name.
Yeah.
I don't think my mother didn't approve of that very much, but it didn't matter. And then it was only when I went to college and started going to a pub in Isleworth called the London Apprentice every Friday night, when a bunch of musicians would get together and play music, that I began to take an interest in. And somebody came up to me and said, "Have you got a group?" And I said, "No, we just play together and sing together." And they said, "Well, we'd like to book you for our folk club. And what's your name? Have you got a name for your group?" And I said, "There are three of us, myself, Tony Hooper, and a mandolin player. Arthur Phillips, his name was." And we were rehearsing in Strawberry Hill in a flat. I'll tell you about that as well in a minute. And a flat there. And it happened to be in Strawberry Hill. So the music we were listening to was American, Appalachian music, more bluegrassy music. And I said, "Oh, we're the Strawberry Hill Boys." And so our first name became the Strawberry Hill Boys. It was just plucked out of the sky. There's no particular reason for it. It was an albatross around our necks, because when it got shortened to America, and we went to America, and they said, "Oh, Strawbs. Is that Strawbs?" I said, "No, Strawbs, as in strawberries." They said, "Strabs?" I said, "No, Strawbs, as in short for strawberries." And so I think that was a hindrance for our career, if anything, although the name has stuck.
That's right. Yeah, that's a good story. You study, I believe, statistics, mathematics, right, as well, when you.
Yeah. I went to college and I studied mathematics, statistics, physics, British archaeology, and psychology, all in one 3-year spell.
Wow, good for you, man. So eventually you finish your degree, and you need, I suppose, to make a decision in your life, which is hard, right? Go to the music path, or just get a regular job, or go to a master's degree or whatever. And
I didn't go for a master's degree. I went into advertising to start with.
Yeah.
I worked in advertising for 2 years, and then I decided to set up my own advertising agency and market research company. I was 24 years old at the time. I hadn't written a song at all in my life, and we were playing around folk clubs as the Strawberry Hill Boys, playing American bluegrass music, because I found the sound of the banjo very attractive, and I wanted to play the banjo. I got an LP from the Newport Folk Festival, and it had Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs on it, and I listened to that, and I thought, I want to play the banjo like that. I wonder how they do it. And there was nobody in England playing banjo like that. So luckily I had a record player that had a half-speed tab on it. So I turned the record down, instead of 33 1/3, down to 16 and whatever it was, and listened to Earl Scruggs' banjo playing, and I could pick out the patterns that he was doing from playing it at half speed. And I learned to play the banjo, bluegrass style, by listening to Earl Scruggs at half speed.
Wow, good for you, man.
And I met him years later. It would be about 10 years ago now, at the Edmonton Folk Festival. He was headlining there, and we were on the bill as well. And I saw his show, and it was absolutely marvelous. He came off stage, and but quite by chance, I wanted to go back to the hotel, and I walked out to the road to get a bus or a taxi back. And there he was standing on his own. And I went up to him and said, "Mr. Scruggs?" He says, "Yep." I said, "I learned to play the banjo by playing your music at half speed." He said, "I'm going to Dublin next week." And that was the end of our conversation because his taxi turned up.
Wow.
I'd never forgotten it, but he was a very humble man, and he's a wonderful banjo player. But I learned literally to play the banjo bluegrass style, Foggy Mountain Breakdown at half speed by listening to it at half speed.
Good for you. And eventually you guys moved from sort of bluegrass music into folk rock, and then eventually progressive rock, right?
Well, we've never moved into anything.
Right. Or yeah.
Strawbs is a continual evolution. It has never deliberately said, right, we'll be prog rock this week. No, I think we'll be bluegrass this week. No, I think let's go back to folk. No, everything we do is a continual evolution. And the whole evolution behind it is actually the songs themselves. It's the backbone of the Strawbs. It's not who played on the Strawbs. It's actually the evolution of the songs. It's the songs that are what the Strawbs is about. And people tend to forget that. They tend to think, oh, we got a static band, and it's not a static band. It never has been. It's a continually evolving piece of work, and it always has been. And I didn't start writing songs until much later. I was in my mid-20s, and I went to see Bob Dylan in London. He'd come over and done a play, first of all, for the BBC. And then he came back and did 2 shows at the BBC. And I went to the recording of those 2 shows. I was actually sitting in the front row, about 6 feet away from him. I could see the redness in his eyes. You know, I'm not exaggerating. They were bloodshot. And he kept taking his glasses off and peering at his harmonicas to see what key he was picking, which one he was picking up. His eyesight wasn't very good even then. But when he started to sing, he was absolutely mesmerizing and riveting. And quite by chance, around the same time, I saw Donovan on television in the UK singing Catch the Wind. And I thought, well, if a bloke like Donovan can write songs, so can I. So I started writing songs. The first ones were a bit sort of hammy, if you like, in the folky vein, sort of that sort of folk style. But then very rapidly, I started to write at a furious rate. And then I began to involve not only the banjo into it, I began to involve English folk style singing in force. I began to involve Appalachian harmonies as well. And it all became a melting pot that turned out to be what the Strawberry Hill Boys became in our first evolution.
Thank you. Where did you have the opportunity to meet Bob Dylan after the gig or after the zero? No,
I didn't meet him after the show. I've never met him. Yeah. But that one show, he was absolutely riveting. And it's not a well-known show. That's the interesting thing. The BBC wiped the tape because that was the thing that they did at the time to save money, because videotape was incredibly expensive. So they just wiped tapes off and recorded over it. However, I know. However, very few people know this. There's a bootleg collection of Bob Dylan recordings. There's a 10-pack of it. And that BBC concert is number 10 in that pack. And I listen to it quite often. And again, I can still see why I was attracted to the sound that he made. And again, here's something interesting. When I listen to music, I don't listen to the power. I don't listen to the guitar player. I don't listen to the music itself. I don't listen to the words. I listen to the sound of the record. It's the sound of the record that attracts me. But the sound that Bob Dylan had, I found immensely attractive to me. The style of playing, just the overall sound of what he was doing. And to this day, I couldn't sing you a Bob Dylan song all the way through. I've never tried.
Is it fair to say that perhaps Bob Dylan had been one of your major influences in your life, looking back, or?
No, it was the influence was that I was interested because of my Leadbelly connection. I then began to wonder. Well, I then found out that Leadbelly played in New York. I found out that Woody Guthrie went round. They were all part of the same sort of circle of playing folk music, along with Pete Seeger and so on. I became very interested in following that sort of music. Then Jack Elliott came to the UK, Rambling Jack Elliott, and I sat at his feet, and he was mesmerising on stage as well. And I became very friendly with him. And so I'm probably the nearest connection to other people in that I saw Bob Dylan very early, but he was a disciple of Woody Guthrie. And through Jack Elliott, who was Woody Guthrie's best friend, and Bob Dylan sat at his bedside, at Woody Guthrie's bedside with Jack Elliott, I became very friendly with Jack Elliott. So that was the closest connection I had to Woody Guthrie, if you like.
Yeah.
But I admired that style of songwriting, and that's what interested me. I didn't copy the style of songwriting. I sang a couple of Woody Guthrie songs, but I like the narrative style. I like storytelling in my songs, and that comes out in songs like Beside the Rio Grande, or other sorts of songs that have come in that tell a story, like the story of Grace Darling. Those are the sort of songs I like doing and singing.
Yeah, perfect. At the time where you were working for Denmark Radio, or that came later on in 69 to 79?
No, I was very, very lucky because I did my first ever solo tour. I've only ever done 2 solo tours in my whole life. I did one in Denmark in about 1966, I think it was 67, just playing on my own guitar and banjo. I did one TV show on that one, and I met The Who there. But they were on the thing, and they loved my banjo playing, and Pete Townsend gave me his phone number. And I was interviewed by Tom Brown, who was a DJ living in Denmark, married to a Danish girl, presenting a folk music show on Danish radio in English that was recommended listening to school kids because he had the perfect English accent. And they said, if you want to learn English, listen to Tom Brown's show. Well, Tom Brown decided to come back to the UK, and the Danmarks radio said, would he produce a radio show from England of pop music news from London? And he phoned me up and said, look, I know nothing about pop music. Will you produce the show for me? So I became the producer of a show that lasted for 6 years from London right up to 1973. I was producing a show from London called The London News, and I got every rock record that came out that was released. So I heard every rock record from across the entire spectrum. At the same time, I was interviewing people like Captain Beefheart, Cat Stevens, Keith Emerson, interviewing them while I was playing music myself. And they knew that I was playing music, but I was interviewing them at the same time. But this became required listening in Denmark as well. And so I benefited from hearing every rock record. So I had a vast, huge brushstroke of rock music that I was listening to and picking up influences from all of that at the same time.
Yeah. Wow.
And very few people know that I've done that.
Yeah. Wow. Were you able to keep the records, or you just to play on the radio show?
Yeah, no, I kept most of them. You know, still got some of them.
Yeah. So you have a big vinyl
what
collection
interested
at
me,
home?
it influenced me later. In the
Yeah.
one of the records I listened to was the first Love album with the song Alone Again or on it, which I thought was absolutely marvellous. When we were making our album From the Witchwood, we did a song called The Shepherd's Song. And I remember back to that Alone Again or album, and I said, okay, I want a Spanish bit on the end of it. And so I put down a rhythm guitar track, and then Rick Wakeman put Mellotron on top of that. On top of that, he put a Moog synthesizer that just happened to be the first Moog synthesizer in England in the studio. And that was Rick Wakeman's first multi-track recording. But that was influenced by me listening to a Love album that I produced on the radio show and played on the radio show. And so I picked that up. I listened to the Mamas and the Papas. I listened to all the Paul Simon albums as they came out. I listened to the Edgar Broughton Band, and going out and doing interviews with them, I became very friendly with lots of the bands as well.
Man, I wish I'd met you at the time. So we would have hang out.
I served my apprenticeship, they say.
Yeah. Your first impression of probably Cat Stevens, which is one of my heroes, someone, not just Bob Dylan, but you mentioned Paul Simon, well, feel free, or Rick Wakeman. What was your impression at the time, or let's say Cat Stevens?
We played I Love My Dog on the first one of our early shows, which I thought was a great record. And then he became very ill. Well, he had a follow-up to that, but then he became very ill with TB, tuberculosis, and was in hospital. And then he reinvented himself as Cat Stevens and came back as a singer-songwriter. And again, I remember playing My Lady d'Abanville on the radio show on the Danish radio show, and interviewing him at the same time. I got him into the studio because we had another series on the Danish radio called My Top 10. Yeah. And I got Cat Stevens to record his top 10 for me. I got Keith Emerson to record his top 10, Donnie Donegan to record his top 10. I had all these people coming in as well, doing other shows as well.
Wow.
It was extraordinary what we were doing, but nobody knew about it in England, because it was never heard in England, these shows.
Wow. Of course, that was, many years ago. That was before the internet, no cell phone, no computers. So are those programs on recording somewhere, or?
When I went into the radio business in 1980, I was program controller of one of the first 19 commercial radio stations in the UK. And I had an open palette to paint anything I liked. I was told, what's my job? And they said, you're a program controller. I said, what do I do? They said, you're in charge of everything that goes out on the radio station, including the news. So I said, oh, okay. So I can do any program I want, can I? They said, yep. So the first series I did was a series called Rock of Ages, where I interviewed various people that I knew about how their songwriting had been influenced by their religious beliefs. The first person I interviewed was Cat Stevens when he became Yusuf Islam. It was the first interview he did after he became Yusuf Islam. And I've still got that program in a collection. I interviewed Pete Townsend about Maya Barber. I interviewed Bob Marley about his Rastafarian beliefs. And I've got all of those programs here.
We kind of in like a tape, or?
They were on tape. I've had them restored and digitized.
Yeah, good for you. Hey, I need to visit you one day in your own country. I would love to listen to the stuff, man. I would love to. Yeah, make sure that your kids keep that, for future generations.
The other two people in the series were George Harrison and Bob Dylan.
Wow.
So George Harrison was talking about his religious beliefs. And Bob Dylan was talking at the time about being a born-again Christian. And that was an interview I picked up from WNEW in New York, because I knew them very well when I went over there. And they gave me a copy of that particular interview, which I chopped up and used in my series, Rock of Ages.
Good for you. Have you ever thought about? I think you have an autobiography. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Exorcising Ghosts. Exorcising Ghosts.
Yeah.
And it's the story, essentially the story of where I grew up, etc., how I started to play music. But inevitably, it has to go chronologically, album by album, because within each album, the story shifts and changes as the personnel of the band shifted and changed. So my life shifted and changed, and that was interwoven with my personal life.
Gotcha. Are you a religious person at all? Or?
I'm not a religious person. I don't go to church once a week or every now and then. I go to the odd service here and there. Very odd nowadays. There's an interesting item here, is that my father died when I was 6 months old, beg your pardon. I was baptized a Christian, Catholic. My mother married again when I was 6 years old, and she married a Protestant who would not have the Catholic priest in the house. So my brother and sister grew up as Protestants while I grew up as a Catholic. So I went to the Roman Catholic Church, despite the fact that I also sang in the choir of the Church of England church, because you got paid for that. So I then used that storyline, if you like, telling a story, with the song The Hangman and the Papist, which is two brothers growing up on the opposite sides of the religious fence, one a Catholic, one a Protestant. And in the end, one brother hangs the other and hangs him in the name of God.
Yeah, well, I grew up in a Catholic family as well in South America, but I grew up. Yeah, my mom was very religious, very religious. But
I love the Latin.
I changed a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, but I love the Latin Mass, and I love the smell of the incense. It was the atmosphere of the church was very influential on me and on my music. I would say I'm not religious; I'm spiritual. But I love going into old churches. I love going into old castles and old buildings. They reverberate to me.
Yeah, good for you. Your opinion on Paul Simon at the time, where you were playing his music in the radio? Of course, you knew Bob Dylan at the time. What was influence? Were you like his music, his voice, his lyrics?
I think that Paul Simon is a brilliantly talented songwriter and very individual songwriter. I've listened to fragments of his new album, which is very spiritual indeed. It appears to be, I haven't listened to it all the way through, one long piece, although it is divided into 7 separate segments, or psalms as he calls it. But the guitar playing takes me right back to his early guitar playing on Sounds of Silence and so on. It's very good playing, but I'd like to spend some time to get into the album. But I've been so busy recently with building up to this new album we put out that I haven't had time to listen to anything.
Yeah. I got you. No, I understand. And I think you are not retired professionally from the kind of Strawbs, but still doing your own music and keep on recording, right?
I haven't. I'm not retiring. I'm playing live, and the reason is that I've been diagnosed with a condition called MDS, which is, myelodysplastic syndrome. It's a strand of syndromes. I won't say that it will turn into leukemia. It can turn into leukemia.
Yeah.
And so I have a condition which means that I can't mix in crowds in case I pick up an infection. If I pick up an infection, I have to go straight to hospital because my immune system is very badly compromised, and so I can't mingle in crowds. I can't. Somebody coughs in my face, I'm in danger of picking up an infection, so I have to steer clear of being in crowds. So if I go to restaurant, I go there very early at about 12 noon and have an early meal when there are a few people about.
Yeah.
Yes, I do go to a pub, but I don't go to a crowded pub on a Saturday night. It's too dangerous. I go and sit outside in the garden and have a drink. That's fine. But the reason for that, therefore, means that I can't rehearse in a confined space. That's impossible for me because I'm then in danger of picking up an infection. Dave Lambert, for example, our guitar player, has a persistent cough, and I daren't go and be in his close presence for any length of time. So that cuts out rehearsing things. And so I've decided to do one major last show, which is in the open air, which is Fairport Convention's Cropredy Festival. And it's me doing my last farewell show. And I've recruited Blue Weaver's coming to play with me again. John Ford's coming along, and Brian Willoughby's playing with me. And we're going to look back on the whole Strawbs career and play some old favourites. Some people will be very surprised at some of the songs that come out.
Good for you, man. I ended up meeting and interviewing Dave Bainbridge as well. He's a very nice guy as well.
Oh, yeah.
He's a very, very nice person as well, independent of music, he's a very nice person, I have met some musicians that are not that great, but he's a nice person. And feel free to elaborate on your working on your solo debut album released 2 weeks last summer. Feel free to what memory do you have for that one?
It was an album born of frustration and aggravation because we made the album. Where did it fit in the canon? Yes, it came just before Grave New World, and we'd finished the album, but the band the band is beginning to divide itself in two. I wanted to do my longer songs, long ballads, etc., whereas Hudson Ford wanted to do more pop songs. I understood where they were coming from. I understood where I was coming from. But one thing that John Ford said to me, we don't want to do your long songs. They're too blinking long. People won't listen to them. They want to listen to short songs. And I had a song called Blue Angel that I particularly wanted to record. So I thought, right, I'll go and do a solo album of my own. So I thought, well, who am I going to use for it? And the first person I'd seen, because of my connection with the radio shows, was Deep Purple. And I thought, well, they're pretty big, and the bass player seems to be a nice guy. So I got in touch with him, Roger Glover, and I said, will you come and play on it? And he said, well, I don't know if I know anything about the sort of music you want to do. Why don't you come round to my house and we'll play some of the songs, and I'll see if I think I can do it. So I went round to his house, and we got on absolutely famously. He played me the first J.J. Cale album and said, listen to this. This is the sort of thing I like playing. And I played him 2 weeks last summer. And the next thing you know, he's playing a wah-wah bass on 2 weeks last summer. And he did it. So I then had my bass player. I then thought, well, who shall I get on drums? And the guy who was voted the top drummer in the polls every year was John Heisman. So I thought, well, he's supposed to be the best drummer. I'll go and get him. And I said, will you come and do it? And he said, well, do you want to mention my name on the record? I said, yes. He said, well, it'll be a double fee. I said, I don't mind. So he came and played on it. And then I thought, oh, well, Rick left the band about a year ago, and we haven't really done much together. And we are the best of friends anyway, but we hadn't been in touch. And I phoned him up and said, Rick, will you come and play on this? And he said, of course I will. And he turned up in his Rolls Royce and played the most beautiful piano I've ever heard him play in my life. And I keep telling Rick every time I see him, your piano playing is better than your synthesizer playing. He said, rubbish, I'm the best synthesizer player in the world. I said, you're the best piano player in the world. But So we always laugh, and we're still the best of friends.
Good for you. Yeah.
I phoned him up tomorrow and said, "Will you play for me?" He'll always play for me.
Gotcha. You play with Rick Wakeman in several of your albums, right? You have a long friendship from early in the beginning, right? So
yes,
yeah,
I haven't seen him for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Since then, he was given his CBE, Commander of the British Empire, and I've become an honorary Doctor of Music. So Leicester University, where I studied, awarded me an honorary doctorate in music.
Wow, very impressive. Very, very impressive. Yeah, Rick Wakeman is doing his. I have seen him several times here in DC, and he's doing a tour called Grumpy Old Man or something like that, or something of that effect. And he's a nice guy too. He likes to talk, Rick Wakeman too. In between songs, he mentioned, "Well, I did this due to the following reason. I was driving around and blah blah blah." He's half music, the other half of the show is talking and mentioning how the particular track or album or came about and so on and so forth. He's a nice guy too.
He tells a very good story, and it links into, after you listen for 10 minutes, he plays something you know.
Yeah,
but he's very humorous.
And,
but you know, he joined we were the first. He was our first keyboard player, and he, you know, I used to talk and introduce the songs, and he must have picked up what I did, introducing the songs and explaining what they were about. That was very rare in the rock world at that time, and still is.
Yeah.
So I still, when I get up on stage now, even now, I'll still introduce the songs and explain what some of them are about. It makes it much more interesting.
Absolutely.
With Strawbs songs, there is always something in the words that means something. These words aren't just "I love you, babe." These are songs that tell a story, what's going on in the news at the moment. I feel sometimes that I really am an old-fashioned troubadour, if you like, who in the 17th, 18th century would go around from village to village and tell us what was the story of what was going on in the news in song. And now you go and take that back to the old child ballads. And so if you like, I came out of that folk tradition, although I was never a folk singer. I came out of that folk tradition, and I think I'm still telling stories and having my telling my aggravation at what the politicians are saying now, and I can read all in between the lines, but I tell it straight. It's on the new album. Politicians with their hands all smeared with grease. You know, I just get my own back.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know exactly. One of the early hits with your career was "Part of the Union," which reached #2 in the UK singles, and in February 1973 as well up, laid down a popular progressive rock hit for the same album. Feel free to elaborate how the composition kept together, and they're still very, very popular.
Yeah, and John, I'm thrilled that John Ford's coming back to do these last shows with me. We've got 3 little warm-up shows before the big festival that we're doing, Fairport Cropredy Convention. We're doing a very small club, 2 nights there, and a little theatre just 10 minutes from where I am now, sitting now, in Folkestone on the south coast near Dover.
Mm.
And those are the warm-up shows. Blue Weaver, John Ford in the front row there with me. Adam Wakeman's going to join us as well on stage. And I'm the only band leader in the world who's had all 3 Wakeman. I know Yes had Oliver Wakeman, because Oliver Wakeman joined us and then left us to join Yes like his dad. Yeah. But I've actually had all 3 Wakeman playing in the Strawbs. Rick Wakeman, Oliver Wakeman, and Adam Wakeman. So Adam's coming back to play keyboards, and it's going to be great fun.
Good for you. You guys, back in the day, opened tour with Supertramp in the Crime of the Century tour, right?
No, I don't think we ever did the Crime of the Century tour. I don't know where that's come from. It appears up on.
I read that somewhere. Yeah, no, never.
No,
Yeah.
We played with the Eagles. We played with Santana. We played.
Yeah.
With
Wow.
We played with Blue Oyster Cult. We played with King Crimson. But I don't remember Supertramp.
No.
We went around touring with John Entwistle's Ox. We toured with, oh heavens above, every band that there was, but Supertramp.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, sorry for that. King Crimson. Wow, that's one of the.
We did many shows with King Crimson, and they were the best shows I think we ever played, because the combination of the two groups together was a man. We got on very, very well. It was very good friendship, but also. We used to go on most of the shows. We went on first, and I wouldn't say we supported them because it was equal, but we went on, and it was our job was to make sure that their job was as difficult as it could possibly be. So we went on to put on a show, and we played our socks off, and then we said, "Okay, now you go on and do what you can," but it was all good humoured, And backstage, and on days off, we'd all sit around the pool and have a drink and chat together. And people don't know this, but when I got back to England after one of those tours, Bob Fripp phoned me up and said, "David, I think maybe we should do some folk club shows together." So I said, "Oh, okay." So he said, "Well, bring your guitar over to my house, and we'll run through a couple of songs and see how we get on." So I went over there, and Robert said, "A cup of tea?" I said, "Yes, please." And he got his Spanish guitarist footstool out, and his nylon strung guitar. And I got my acoustic guitar out. And they said, "Okay, what do you want to start with?" And I said, "We'll try Ways and Means." He said, "Okay." So I went through it, and he was going through it. And he put his guitar down and said, "I think you're self-sufficient."
Really?
Yes. He said, "You don't need me." And that was the end of that. So we had a nice cup of tea again, and off I went. And it was a great shame we didn't do it, because it would have been absolutely wonderful to have done. But I've never forgotten it to this day. He said, "I think you're self-sufficient. You don't."
Wow. Well, you must be good coming from Robert Fripp. He's very, very rigorous, very strict.
Yeah, but we've been friends, ever since.
Yeah, I think he's touring with his wife now somewhere in
yes,
the UK.
They're on the bill of the same festival we're playing in August.
Yeah.
So I maybe bump into him there. It'd be lovely.
Yeah, good for you, man. Good for you. That's amazing. You ever looking back at your life? I'm talking about the album Settlement for 2021. Active for the last 50 years. You started obviously in the 60s and then 70s, and you ever thought about looking back at your life, 50 years or so as a musician, touring everywhere with the best bands from the world, and that's amazing.
You forget, you see, you think I was playing music in all that time.
Well, yeah. But
I stopped. I took a 20-year sabbatical.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
1980 and the year 2000, when I stopped playing music and went into the radio business.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So I became program controller of Radio Tees in the northeast of England. Then I became managing director of Devon Air Radio down in the West Country. That was then bought out by Capital Radio, and I became a senior executive of the Capital Radio Group. Then I was appointed Special Projects Director of CLT in the UK, which is a division of RTE, the biggest broadcaster in Europe. And so I took 20 years out, and I really didn't play very much at all, hardly ever. So I took 20 years off.
But when you were doing the radio, being involved in the radio, did you miss playing music and vice versa? I mean, then you went back to music and you put the radio aside for a while, and when you were coming, were you able to do both at the same time? I mean, play some gigs here and there, or no? No.
But for 20 years in the radio business, I hardly ever played music.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Wow. If you work it out, in that up to 1980, I wrote around 250 songs. In that 20-year period, I wrote 13 songs. They're all quite good ones, but that was all in 20 years. And since then, in the year 2000, I've written another 100 songs. So I was able to switch off of music and go into radio and concentrate on that. And I was equally able to switch off of radio and go back into music.
Yeah, good for you. Let's talk a little bit about the magic of it all, which is the title track of the new album that I think you have it somewhere. All right, that's good. Good. All right, that's great. That's a beautiful picture as well. So I think the song is both a travelogue, a reflection of the history of unique and heritage of the band, right?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, the band is a continual evolution.
Yeah,
and this record is an evolution again. The continuity of Strawbs is the songs, and that's what people will remember, not who played what guitar solo on what. It's the songs that people will remember, and with this particular album. We were approached. I was approached. I went to South Africa on holiday, did a few solo shows, and I'd had no idea that there was people knew who I was. I just did the shows for a bit of fun, and it turned out that the last show I did was in the open air in Stellenbosch, the heart of the wine district, and 400 people turned out, and I was absolutely amazed and so. People were coming up and saying, you had no idea how important and popular you were in the 1970s. Wow. It was at the time of apartheid, and people who were fighting apartheid were used our songs as the sort of rallying point. Part of the Union became a very big song, a huge song over there. Shine on Silver Sun was a monster hit over there, a huge record, and I had no idea of this. And then when I was due to go back to South Africa, and I was approached by a documentary maker who said, I would like to make a documentary of Strawbs, showing how important Strawbs, the influence of Strawbs has been worldwide. Would you consider coming to South Africa and recording with South African musicians? And I said, certainly. So Blue Weaver, who produced the previous album, Settlement, came with me, and we went into a studio, which was in the Academy of Sound Engineering in Cape Town. Now, it's a working college, and the idea was that we would be recording in the studio. There would be a cameraman in there taking footage, filming every minute of every day that we were in that studio. And so we sat there. There were no special lights set up. It was all done as sort of, discreet. But not only was there the cameraman in the studio all the time we were recording, there were a dozen students in what was the lecture room, which was the control room, watching what we were doing and learning from it. But they also had the job of miking up the drum kit, moving the microphones. And so they were learning at the same time as we were learning from them. And so when we had lunch breaks, we all sat round the table and chatted about what they were doing and what they were studying. And they were asking us questions about our music and how the songs were written and how we played them. And it was a learning process from both sides. Now, the new album is not only the album from those sessions, it's also the title track of the documentary, which will be coming out later in the year.
I got it, right. It's going to be like a Blu-ray, that type of thing, or?
Yeah, it'll be on Blu-ray.
5.1, I suppose, yeah, or Atmos, or yeah.
Yep.
Well, good for you, man. Good for you. Looking back at your life, change anything you regret or perhaps would have done differently looking back, or?
There are things I regret, naturally, and there are songs I could have done better. And it's all in the songs. Everything I've ever is in my songs. They're autobiographical, or they're reflecting what's going on in the world around me. And if people want to know about me, just read the words of the songs. You have to be. I don't write it out in literally as it happened in prose. It's sometimes I hide things under a little disguise, but it's up to people to work out what the song is about. Tsangarides is a question in point. There you are. Who is Tsangarides? It could be a politician. It could be a royalty. It could be a financier. It's up to people to work out and read the words of the songs. The clues are all there, and you've got to get really deeply into those words to work out who it is.
Yeah.
And it's the same all the way through the album. There are pointers all the way through, and there's storytelling within the songs.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. You have played with so many great musicians, and anyone you wish you have had the opportunity to play with that it didn't work out, you didn't, or whatever.
We had Don Airey playing in the band on keyboards for about a year, and I wanted to record with Don. Yeah. And in a strange way, he was absolutely right. He said, "I don't think we're ready to record yet." I said, "Well, we've got these songs I want to do." He said, "We haven't rehearsed them as much as I would like to do before we go into a studio. I'm the sort of person who wants to rehearse the songs, to work out everything before I go into a studio." And I said, "Well, I tend to go into a studio and work it out when I'm there." And so he didn't do it. And curiously, Blue Weaver came back and we went into the studio. The album was very successful. I regret not actually having recorded with Don. Maybe I'll get him back to do it sometime.
Yeah, good for you. And the last question, feel free to elaborate where the listener can buy your music, or feel free to mention the website or anything that you want.
Our records are readily available. Our back catalogue is on Universal.
Yeah.
And I'd love to, if they would put out revised vinyl versions of the old albums, because with modern technology, you can make them sound spectacular.
Absolutely.
But on CD, I'm very happy with what we're doing now with Cherry Red Records. We have a working relationship. They put some money in to fund it. I'd put some extra money in to fund it myself, especially on this particular project, because it's been very expensive. But I'm working on the fact that, unfortunately, I believe that streaming is actually killing the music business. In the free access or next to nothing access, it means that the musicians can't earn a living from royalties now. The major companies are making the bulk of the money from the old recordings because, for example, the maximum royalty we ever got out of A&M in the old days was 13%. And so any royalties we get from streaming now from the old Universal records, the royalties are paid at 13%, and they get 87% of the royalty that comes in, which is it should be changed.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it now means that bands from a certain era are having to go out and slog their way around clubs and pubs or whatever, playing anything just to earn a living for their retirement. which is totally unfair. I can't do that now because I've got this medical condition. So I shall just sit back and keep making records on my own, but there'll still be Strawbs albums, and watch this space.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's very nice talking to you. And on the next time in the UK, hopefully we can get together for a cup of tea or coffee or whatever.
Yeah,
or a beer will be very. It was very nice talking to you, sir.
And very secretly, I'll play you one of my old tapes that I've got.
That will be. That's well, definitely. I would love to see what you have there with all your archives, with all the interviews, and it's amazing that for like I told you before, music. Although I'm not a musician, I don't know how to play music. Had played an important part of my life. My dad had a lot of music growing up, so music had given me a lot of satisfaction. I don't know how to express it better than that. And music is a beautiful thing, in life. And hopefully, the young kids or the future generation will take music and will support the musician by buying the music and not download stuff or bootlegging stuff or the streaming that in Spotify you get only pennies. So it's
the reason why we put out stuff on vinyl, is that people collect vinyl.
Oh, I do, yeah, definitely.
And some people don't even open the record; they just have it and keep it shrink wrapped, and it's a collector's piece.
Yeah.
And so I've got here the CD in one hand, vinyl in the other hand.
Absolutely, yeah.
But we try and make the packaging as attractive as we possibly can. I make sure that the lyrics are always on the album sleeves because the lyrics are very, very important as far as Strawbs music is concerned.
Absolutely, yeah. So hopefully when I'm there, and I will buy all your albums for you to sign and autograph it, so I can keep it in my collection somewhere in the house.
You'll have to bring a container truck to carry them all.
Oh, yeah. Well, an extra suitcase, maybe. It was very nice talking to you, David.
It's been lovely talking to you as well. And thank you very much for having me on the show.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.